Welcome to Examples for Learning, where we are going to focus on student independent work, but with very intentional teacher choices and work tasks or examples that students will use to also self-evaluate and get feedback from both an established criteria, such as a rubric, or possibly peers, or then also, of course, teacher feedback. But the feedback a teacher is going to give is going to be more passive in this case because it's going to already have been embedded inside a scoring rubric that students then are using. So in a sense, you are directing the feedback that they're giving themselves. So certainly a big part of the equation in the process, but more about showing students how a growth mindset that includes understanding, application, and then reflection is going to serve them well both in your course and throughout the course of their college and career next steps. Even if you're talking about elementary school, this is the perfect time to establish and start the beginnings of that kind of mindset. So let's just recap, because this is the culmination, as mentioned in the intro video, of our definition of rigorous and engaging instruction. Remember, this is highly effective instruction in a blended learning environment. So highly effective instruction is rigorous and engaging instruction. We define this as ways which require students to create their own meaning and internalize that meaning of content, ways in which teachers provide opportunities for students to collaborate, to help develop, deepen, and create a personal process, and then ways in which teachers facilitate the application of that understanding and their personal process so that students can get an understanding of where they are with the content. Now, we do this by examining the content standards. We are a standards-driven, standards-based educational system. The standard is what reveals the what and how of the lesson. The key words behind the what is really where our level of rigor comes in. What level of thinking is required for students to answer assessment questions about this standard? Now, the how piece is very important for our lesson objective writing. It really sets the stage for either how this understanding and process is going to be developed, or how the understanding and process is going to be assessed and the evidence of learning become clear to student and teachers. We do this through an entry process. Our entry process is a progressive complexity process that you'll see, we'll talk about in a minute, places a focus on content, skill, or application, or all three at the same time. Okay, when you craft a multiple entry point content conversation, you then are able to provide all three at the same time and prepare kids to see the content from different angles. This will lead to and develop the substance or the content for your mini lesson. So a mini lesson to students from teacher is at times direct instruction, at times modeling of process, at times it is the application of a content process. So you are kind of creating this front loading or modeling for them as they get into exploration. The exploration is a strategically created collaborative experience that allows students to listen to multiple perspectives, multiple pathways to formulate their own opinions and their own process. It is really important, the end of this comment that's on the screen here that says learning to persist through struggle. Okay, learning to persist through struggle is different than creating an experience that is too difficult for them to accomplish. So our job is to make things very clear, concise, and ride the line between a persistent and struggle and a frustration level. When we ask students to, and we walk them through the accomplishment of a persistent struggle, then we are doing that by creating collaborative experiences with much purpose and intentionality. So it's much easier when to bring clarity when we have thought about, why am I having my students collaborate together? Are they doing any one of these 4 things? When you think about the 3 different ways to approach content, from content understanding to skills and application, or to applying to different contexts, you think about then the different reasons why they might collaborate. All of this leads us to today's work, which is examples for learning, also known as independent work tasks, and it answers the question: as a result of internalizing their meaning and collaborating to deepen their understanding, what can they do on their own, and how can they self-evaluate? It is super important that as teachers, we are involving students in this process. We're asking them these questions. What can you do now by yourself as a result of having worked together with your peers and together as a whole group, including teacher, on our entry experience? And how do you know you got it? What does right look like? I want to revisit this quote that oftentimes we teach one idea and assess another all within the same lesson. And if you remember from the intro, which probably wasn't that long ago, I spoke about the idea that teachers misalign their work tasks and they create entry experiences that might focus on the application and the skills of a content, and then they might assess the deep content understanding and pose questions that pass a frustration level for students because they weren't set up for success. They were basically, and probably unknowingly, set up for failure. I have personal experience with students who have come back to tell me that what was on the test we didn't do in class. And I cringe and I try to not beat myself up over that, but I know that that is my fault, that it was covered in class, but the way in which I might have covered the material didn't align to the way it was assessed. And so we have to make sure that we work through a little bit of some criteria. So here are some checklist ideas that we can use to make sure that our practice is aligned to our objective, which of course has to start by being aligned to our standard. So we recognize what the skill of the standard is. And we do that by looking at the verbs. What are we trying to accomplish by using this standard? Not the nouns. A quick for instance would be, if the standard speaks about the Pythagorean theorem, we have to watch and look as to what is it developing the understanding, the proof of, the concept of the Pythagorean theorem? Is it saying that students will use the Pythagorean theorem to chart distance on the coordinate plane? Those are way 2 different ways to approach the Pythagorean theorem. And we have to recognize what is the verb of that. What is the standard asking the students to do? And that's how we'll know how to create the what of our objective, and then of course the how of our objective. We'll use entry points then that progress in complexity and represent concept, skill, and application. From there, we'll create these examples for learning that connect to any one of those or all of those. And that's going to be a choice that you'll have to make as to how you're developing this content. Sometimes lessons and standards need to be taught over several days to fully develop the concept first, to look at how the skills of that concept connect to the understanding of it, and then how to apply it. So let's go back to the Pythagorean theorem. The idea that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We might spend a lot of time talking about the relationship and reminding students about the relationship between multiplication and the idea of area or square feet, square units. From there, we might be able to work on the skill of squares, square roots, and the combinations of those things. Then we might put that all together to apply it to a context that answers or solves a problem, right? So this can be represented in one lesson. It could be represented in several lessons. That is going to be determined by your pace and how your scope and sequence is moving through your material. But the last piece here, I mentioned it, I want to reiterate. We're choosing examples that students can then self-reflect against an established criteria, which makes this experience personal. They're not submitting work hoping to hear a good report from you. This is a time where it's quality over quantity, where it's a time that they are first self-reflecting before you even see it. Okay, enough of the soapbox. So here are some highly effective examples for learning as written by Charlotte Danielson. This would represent that highly effective level 4 of this category. And it says that assessment, that might just jump out at you and say, wait, assessment? Yeah, that's what we're doing here. We're creating formative assessment moments, but we're trying to put the emphasis on the student's self-assessment. Okay, so the assessment is fully integrated into the instruction. Well, I think that we've covered the fact that this would be fully integrated. Then also that they are aware. Remember, let the students be aware of the process. Let them know what the criteria for success is. And there's some evidence that they've contributed to that assessment criteria. And in a few minutes, Nicole is going to come and talk you through and show you how to create a student-centered and a student-led scoring rubric. That your questions and assessments are used regularly to diagnose evidence of learning by individual students. Now that sounds good, but let's not forget, when we talk about questioning and discussion or questions, it's not only verbal. We need to take into account of the written questions, the work tasks, the things that we're asking students to do in independent thinking and learning, and then we can use those to regularly diagnose. Many times I've heard great teachers say, let's look at how we can use this in a real world context. Let's see how this content connects to the past and what we've already done, where it is also going, so future use, and how it's assessed. Those are important distinctions to make and to show students on a daily basis. We're going to use a variety of forms of feedback. Okay, so student, teacher, peers, but of course we want to make sure it's accurate and specific, and it pushes the learning forward. So anytime we're giving feedback, we're always encouraging students to think of it in their own way, in this way, and peers, but we are also reminding ourselves that the point of positive feedback is to advance learning, not to only give a gold star and write the word great with an exclamation mark. That is not effective feedback. That is encouraging, and it is sometimes very useful and important. We want to make sure that we are increasing motivation, right, by giving real strong positive feedback in that way. But most importantly, we want to make sure that our feedback advances learning. And that sounds like a few more supporting details and you would have reached a level 4. Okay, that gives pretty specific, and it connects to the rubric, assuming we had this rubric, and it also shows students how they can advance. in their learning. Students then self-assess and monitor their own progress, and that we as teachers use many different differentiation strategies to address then individual students' misunderstandings. So when we recognize a misunderstanding or a missed opportunity, it's not just the feedback that we use. We then have to address the problem, and that gets differentiated out in different ways. And we will touch on that a little bit in the last session of this course during our differentiation time. So these are the words of Danielson. They are not things that I made up. This was straight copy and pasted out of the Danielson rubric. This is the way in which you as a teacher now and in the future will be evaluated under the idea of domain 3, which is delivery of instruction. These are the observable qualities of highly effective teaching. All right, we're going to transition now to building a student-centered scoring rubric, and then I'll be back after that with some ways to incorporate web tools such as Edpuzzle into this process.